I swear, someone told me to drive fast through that road tonight. The officer frowned. Someone? The driver nodded nervously, but I never saw their face. Inside the hospital, Lena's heart monitor beeped slowly. She was alive, but no one outside that room knew it. Fade to black. The news spread quickly. Lena Hart had died in a tragic accident. Friends mourned, co-workers cried, but two people reacted very differently. Daniel and Carla. Daniel scrolled through his phone in disbelief. A news article appeared. Young woman killed in late-night accident. The name made his stomach drop. Lena Hart. Carla stared at the screen, then slowly whispered, "Is this real?" Daniel swallowed. "I think so." They sat in silence. Carla eventually spoke. "Well, that solves our problem." Daniel looked at her sharply. "You shouldn't say things like that." But even he couldn't hide the relief in his eyes. Days later, a small funeral was held. Lena's co-workers attended. Her boss cried. She was one of the best people I ever worked with. Daniel stood quietly beside the coffin. Everyone believed he was grieving, but inside, he felt something very different. Guilt. Carla squeezed his arm. "Relax," she whispered. "No one suspects anything." At a private hospital room, Lena slowly opened her eyes. Everything hurt. Machines surrounded her. A nurse rushed to call the doctor. "You're lucky," the doctor said gently. "You survived a very serious accident." Lena whispered weakly. "How long?" 2 weeks. Then the doctor hesitated. "There's something you should know." He showed her a news article about her own death. Lena stared at the screen in shock. Lena whispered slowly, "So? Everyone thinks I'm dead?" The doctor nodded. For a long moment, Lena said nothing. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled faintly. "Good." Fade to black. Lena had just learned the world believed she was dead. But the truth about her accident was even darker. Because someone might have wanted her dead. Later that day, a tall man entered Lena's hospital room. He wore a sharp suit and carried himself with quiet authority. "My name is Vincent Hale," he said calmly. "I've been investigating your accident." Lena frowned. "Why?" Hale sat down. "Because it wasn't an accident." Hale explained everything. The driver who hit Lena had been paid to drive fast down that street. Someone gave him instructions. The driver didn't know who hired him, but the payment came from a business account. A company Lena recognized instantly, Daniel's startup. Lena's heart stopped. Hale leaned forward. "You have 2 options. You can return to your old life, or let the world believe you're dead." Lena thought about Daniel, Carla, the betrayal. Then she whispered quietly, "If they think I'm dead, they'll never see me coming." Hale smiled slightly. "Exactly." Lena stared out the window. Her voice was calm but cold. "The girl they betrayed died that night." Hale nodded slowly. "Then who are you now?" Lena's eyes hardened. "Someone they should fear." Fade to black. Months passed. The weak, trusting Lena disappeared. In her place, a new woman was rising. Hale introduced Lena to the world of business strategy, investments, negotiations, power. Lena studied constantly, day and night. She was no longer the naive woman who trusted easily. Meanwhile, Daniel's company began growing rapidly, using Lena's stolen money. Carla celebrated every success. "See," she said proudly, "you made the right choice." Daniel nodded. But sometimes, late at night, he still thought about Lena. From a distance, Lena watched everything, through financial reports, through social media, through Hale's contacts. One evening, she whispered quietly, "They're happy." Hale looked at her. "For now." Lena placed a document on the table, a purchase contract. She'd just bought shares in Daniel's biggest creditor. The first move in her revenge had begun. Fade to black. Daniel thought he was winning. His company was growing. Money was flowing in. But he had no idea. The woman he betrayed was slowly taking everything away. Carla pushed Daniel to expand faster. Bigger offices, more investors, more publicity. Daniel hesitated. We're moving too fast. Carla shook her head. Success waits for no one. Meanwhile, Lena quietly built a financial empire. Investment after investment succeeded. Hale watched with growing respect. You learn quickly, he said. Lena replied calmly, I learned from betrayal. One evening, Daniel received shocking news. His largest creditor had been bought by an unknown investor. The company now demanded immediate repayment. Daniel panicked. Who bought them? The banker shook his head. We don't know. Across the city, Lena watched the news calmly. Hale asked, Ready to reveal yourself? Lena shook her head. Not yet. She looked at Daniel's company building through the window. First, I want him to lose everything. Fade to black. Daniel believed his company was finally becoming successful. Investors were showing interest. Money was flowing in, and the past he left behind seemed buried forever. But somewhere in the shadows, the woman he betrayed was quietly taking control of his entire future. Daniel sat in his office staring at financial reports. The numbers didn't make sense. How can this be happening? He muttered. A banker sat across from him. Your largest creditor has been purchased by a private investor. Daniel frowned. Who? The banker shook his head. The identity is confidential. Daniel leaned back in frustration. So someone suddenly owns most of my debt? The banker nodded. Yes. And they're demanding repayment? Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. That night, Daniel told Carla everything. Carla didn't look worried. Instead, she rolled her eyes. It's probably just some investor trying to scare you. Daniel shook his head. No, something feels wrong. Carla poured herself a drink. You're paranoid. Daniel stared at the financial papers again. Someone is targeting the company. Carla smirked. Well, whoever they are, they'll regret it. But neither of them knew. The person behind it all was already watching. In a luxurious office overlooking the city skyline, Lena sat calmly across from Mr. Hale. On the table were several contracts. Hale looked impressed. You now control 40% of Daniel's debt. Lena nodded. That's not enough yet. Hale raised an eyebrow. You plan to take everything? Lena smiled faintly. Yes. She looked out the window toward the distant city lights. He took 3 years of my life. I'll take his entire future. Hale handed Lena another document. Your next move is ready. Lena read it slowly, then smiled. She had just purchased shares in Daniel's company through anonymous investors. The trap was tightening, and Daniel had no idea. Daniel's company was suddenly surrounded by mysterious investors. Shares were disappearing, debts were rising, and somewhere behind it all, a familiar pair of eyes was watching his downfall. Daniel stormed into a meeting room filled with his staff. Who sold these shares? He demanded. One employee spoke nervously. They were bought through multiple private accounts. Daniel slammed the table. This isn't random. Someone is planning something. The employees looked worried. Meanwhile, Daniel's phone buzzed. Another email from the bank. More financial pressure. Carla visited Daniel's office later that evening. You need to stay calm, she said. Daniel shook his head. Our company could collapse if this continues. Carla crossed her arms. Then find a big investor. Daniel sighed. That's not easy. Carla smiled suddenly. I might have good news. She handed him an invitation, an exclusive investor conference. Daniel read the name of the event. A mysterious new investment group called Aurora Holdings was funding promising startups. Carla grinned. This could save everything. Daniel nodded slowly. Maybe, but he still felt uneasy. At the same time, Lena reviewed the same invitation. Hale smiled. The event is ready. Lena nodded. Good. Hale leaned forward. You know, once you reveal yourself, everything changes. Lena looked calm. I know. Hale studied her carefully. Are you ready to face him again? Lena paused, then answered quietly. I've been ready for months. Daniel placed the invitation on his desk. This investor conference might save my company. Across the city, Lena whispered softly, Yes, it will. Daniel arrived at the investor conference hoping to save his business. But the moment the host walked onto the stage, his entire world stopped, because the woman he thought was dead was standing right in front of him. The luxury hotel ballroom buzzed with wealthy investors and entrepreneurs. Daniel adjusted his tie nervously. This could change everything, he told Carla. Carla nodded confidently. Just impress them. The lights dimmed. The host walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Aurora Holdings. Applause filled the room. Then the spotlight revealed the speaker. Daniel froze. His heart nearly stopped. It was Lena. Alive. The room applauded loudly, but Daniel felt like the world had turned upside down. He whispered, That's impossible. Carla stared at the stage in horror. No. She died. But Lena stood confidently under the bright lights, elegant, powerful, untouchable. Nothing like the woman they once knew. Lena looked out at the crowd. Her eyes slowly scanned the room. Then they stopped, directly on Daniel. For a moment their eyes locked. Daniel felt his blood run cold. She knew he was there. Daniel couldn't believe what he was seeing. The woman he betrayed, the woman he thought had died, was now standing in front of hundreds of powerful investors, and she looked stronger than ever. Lena began speaking calmly. Aurora Holdings was built on one belief. That betrayal can either destroy you or make you stronger. Daniel's hands started shaking. Carla whispered urgently, We need to leave. But Daniel couldn't move. He kept staring at Lena. After the speech ended, guests rushed to congratulate Lena. Daniel pushed through the crowd desperately. He had to know the truth. Finally, he stood in front of her. Lena, he whispered. She turned slowly. Her expression was calm, almost distant, as if she were looking at a stranger. Daniel asked the question, trembling in his voice. How are you alive? Lena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, The girl who loved you died that night. Fade to black. Daniel thought Lena had come back to confront him, to argue, to scream. But instead, she'd returned with something far more dangerous. Power. Daniel stood frozen. What do you mean? He asked. Lena replied calmly. The woman standing in front of you isn't the one you betrayed. Daniel looked confused. Lena, listen. But Lena raised her hand. You should be careful what you say. Daniel frowned. Why? Lena smiled faintly. Because I now own most of your company's debt. Daniel's face turned pale. Daniel shook his head. That's impossible. Lena handed him a document. He read the name of the investor controlling his creditors, Aurora Holdings. His hands began shaking. You? Lena nodded. Yes. Lena stepped closer and whispered something that terrified him. This is only the beginning. Daniel looked at her in shock. What are you going to do? Lena's eyes turned cold. Take everything you stole from me. Daniel thought seeing Lena alive was the worst shock of his life. But that moment was only the beginning, because Lena didn't come back for closure. She came back to take everything he had built, piece by piece. Daniel stood frozen, holding the document Lena had just handed him. Aurora Holdings, the company controlling most of his debt. His voice trembled. You own my creditors? Lena looked calm. Yes. Daniel shook his head. You're bluffing. Lena pulled out another document. This one shows the shares I recently acquired in your company. Daniel read the numbers. His face slowly turned pale. She now owned a controlling portion of his business. Carla pulled Daniel aside immediately. This is insane, she whispered. She's trying to scare us. Daniel shook his head. No, the documents are real. Carla looked toward Lena across the room. For the first time, Carla felt afraid, because the quiet, kind girl she once mocked was gone. Lena approached them again calmly. I'm not here to embarrass you tonight, she said. Daniel stared at her. Then what do you want? Lena's voice was cold. I want justice. Daniel scoffed. Justice? You invested in my company. You didn't own me. Lena leaned closer. No, but you stole from me. And worse, you tried to erase me. Daniel froze. He didn't know what she meant yet, but he would soon. As Lena walked away, she said one final sentence. Tomorrow morning, your company will lose its largest contract. Daniel stared after her in disbelief. How could she possibly do that? Across the room, Lena simply smiled. Daniel thought Lena was bluffing, but the next morning, everything began collapsing exactly the way she predicted, and then she revealed a truth that changed everything. Daniel rushed into his office the next morning. His assistant looked terrified. We lost the Orion contract. Daniel slammed his desk. That contract was worth millions. The assistant nodded nervously. They switched to Aurora Holdings. Daniel's stomach dropped. Daniel stormed into Lena's office later that day. You're destroying my company, he shouted. Lena didn't look surprised. She calmly poured herself a cup of tea. You destroyed it yourself. Daniel's voice shook with anger. You're doing this out of revenge. Lena looked at him carefully. Revenge? No. She leaned forward. Truth. Lena opened a file on her desk. Police reports, phone records, financial transfers. The man who hit me that night, she said quietly, was paid. Daniel's face went pale. He confessed. Daniel stepped back slowly. That's ridiculous. Lena slid the file toward him. The payment came from an account connected to your company. Daniel whispered. No. Lena looked directly into his eyes. You didn't just betray me, Daniel. You tried to kill me. Daniel wasn't the only one responsible. There was someone else who helped plan everything. Someone Lena once trusted like a sister. Carla. Carla stormed into Daniel's office. You told her everything? She shouted. Daniel looked furious. I didn't tell her anything. Carla panicked. Then how does she know about the accident? Daniel rubbed his face. I don't know. For the first time, they realized how powerful Lena had become. Later that evening, Lena invited them both to a private meeting. They arrived nervously. Lena calmly placed another folder on the table. Inside were text messages, emails, bank transfers, all connecting Carla to the driver. Carla's face turned white. "This is fake," she whispered. Lena shook her head. "No. You helped arrange the meeting between Daniel and the driver." Carla's voice cracked. "I didn't mean for her to die." The room went silent. Daniel slowly turned toward Carla. "You planned this?" Carla began crying. "You said it was the only way." Suddenly the door opened. Police officers walked inside, and Lena spoke calmly. "I believe these two have something to confess." Daniel and Carla thought the worst was over, but Lena had spent months preparing something far bigger, and tonight, their entire world collapsed. The police placed handcuffs on Daniel and Carla. Carla cried hysterically. "I didn't want to hurt her." Daniel stared at Lena in disbelief. "You set this up." Lena replied quietly. "No, you did." Before being taken away, Daniel asked one last question. "Why go this far?" Lena paused for a moment, then answered softly, "Because some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness." Daniel lowered his head. For the first time, he truly realized what he had lost. As the police car drove away, Mr. Hale approached Lena. "You handled that perfectly," he said. Then he added something strange. "Just like your mother would have." Lena looked at him thoughtfully. Daniel believed Lena planned everything after surviving the accident. But the truth was far darker, because the accident itself was never meant to kill her. Later that night, Lena met Mr. Hale in his office. "You did well," Hale said. "Daniel and Carla are finished." Lena nodded. "Your investigation worked perfectly." Hale smiled slightly. "You were the key." Lena looked at him carefully. "You knew about Daniel's crimes long before the accident?" Hale nodded. "Yes. We just needed proof." Lena asked quietly. "So the accident?" Hale replied calmly. "It was meant to trap Daniel. But we never expected you to get hurt that badly." Then Hale looked at her. "You were supposed to be bait." The room fell silent. Hale expected Lena to look shocked, but instead, she slowly smiled. "I know." Hale frowned. "You knew?" Lena nodded. "I discovered the truth months ago." Hale stared at her in disbelief. "Then why continue the plan?" Lena's eyes turned cold. "Because I wanted to finish it." Lena stood up and walked toward the window, overlooking the city. The same city where her life once collapsed. Hale asked quietly, "So what happens now?" Lena answered calmly, "Now I live." Then she added one final chilling line. "The only difference, the girl they betrayed would have forgiven them." She turned toward the door. "But the woman they created never will." If you enjoyed this emotional story, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful love and life stories.